All right. Hey, it's Lauren Abrams with 52 Weeks of Hope, and I'm so excited. I have guest Billy Saleebey, and his episode just dropped on Wednesday. It's so good. I had so much fun talking to you. I said we have to go live this week. It's all about reaching your full potential, but really we talked about connection and how to make your tribe, and it's just chock full of so much great information and energy. So first, Billy, go ahead and introduce yourself for anybody who doesn't know who you are.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. So excited to be here with you. As you said just before, we could talk. The two of us get two of us together. We could talk. That there's no shortage of that. So, hi everyone. If you don't know who I am yet, nice to meet you. My name is Billy, and I run a podcast agency. I also host a couple podcasts. My background is in learning and development. I worked for Solar City and then Tesla, leading global training teams. And I'm a filmmaker as well. So I made a movie out of college and had an amazing journey from there in the corporate space, and all led to me now being in the podcast space. So excited to talk about anything you want. My thing is always asking people, what are those life moments? What are those moments of insight that have made the biggest impact? And that's why my show is called Inside Out.
Yeah, and there were a couple things in particular that I really enjoyed talking to you about on the podcast. One was okay, because I ask people every single week, what made you take that leap? Because so many people are afraid to take the leap. They feel like there's something that they're meant to do while they're here on Earth, like while they're here, and they're not doing it. They're not aligned with what it is, and they're afraid. So I'm not going to go into all of the imposter syndrome. There's quizzes on the website and blogs, and I've written about it and studied it. But aside from just basic fear, um, maybe somebody doesn't know anyone in that space, and you talk so well about how to find people. Um, but you are around so many people that are innovators and you get insights and all of that. You spoke so well to all of that. So I'll pass that punt to you
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Well, I'd say it's all about momentum. Okay. And I think a lot of times when we're at a quote unquote standstill, we're not doing whatever it is we want to do, we desire to do. It's because we haven't taken that first step. And I think often we get so overwhelmed by the big picture goal that it seems daunting. And when it seems daunting, then we're prone to not take action, and that inaction prevents us from building and establishing some momentum. So even a train that goes fast takes a little bit of time to get going. And so what I would suggest is figure out what goal you have. Do you want to have a YouTube channel? Do you want to write a book? Do you want to leave your job? Whatever that is, whatever that end goal is, write it down and then reverse engineer how you get there by making micro goals and micro steps. And then to your point, don't do it alone. Figure out who has done something similar to you, who you can ask questions, who you can be, how hopefully that they could be by your side as you go down your path. And then the last thing I'll share that will hopefully get anyone who's listening unstuck is remember that the story that you're telling yourself is almost always wrong. That's the thing, is that we have these stories that we make up about why we can't do something, about how something has to be X, Y, or Z or perfect. And the reality is it doesn't. It doesn't have to be perfect. And you're not perfect. No one's perfect.
Yeah.
So be okay with building something in versions. And I mentioned this when we met on your show. Version 1 does not need to be version 10. And that's okay. You need to have that first version in order for you to get to that second or third or fourth version. But it starts with putting something out there. And it may not be everything you imagine it to be, but it's a start.
Yeah, the negative self-talk, I don't know how many episodes I have on that, but there's plenty. But to get out of that negative self-talk, not to listen to that station, change the station in your head. Change the station. I don't know if that's
Exactly.
even relevant anymore. If anybody knows what I'm talking about, our kids would not. That's for sure. But yeah. So to get clarity is always a problem too. So when people are like, there's so many, how do I know the first step? Because you're like, oh, just,
Mm,
and any step is any kind of action creates further action is always good. But how does somebody know when they're overwhelmed? How to even start? What would you tell them?
Yeah, well, I think your point's well taken. I think most people struggle defining what it is that they want to do or what it is they will fulfill them, right? Because purpose matters. You got to have something that's going to make you feel good about whatever it is you're doing. And that is core to the human condition. We want to do something meaningful. And I think especially now in today's age where we have no shortage of examples of people doing something that we admire, that we respect, that we in some way want to emulate. And I don't think you should turn that away. Like, I don't think you ignore all the things that are happening around you, but at the same time, don't compare yourself to other people. Compare yourself to yourself. And how do you get 1% better tomorrow than you are today, making those micro improvements? So when you talk about overwhelm and you talk about this idea of kind of feeling like you don't know what direction to pick, the good news is even if you make a wrong decision, you could pivot.
Yes.
So I would say it's better to make some decision than no decision. And it doesn't need to be the perfect decision. This is why having advisors and having people, I mentioned this when we talked, having a personal board of directors, either real or imagined. And the idea here is that you can ask people in your network that you feel will be someone that will tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And they're not going to sugarcoat it. They're going to be direct and honest. And then you could have an imagined board of directors that you make up in your head. It could be Steve Jobs. It could be Elon Musk. It could be Martin Luther King or Abraham Lincoln, and people throughout history that you admire. You think about how would they handle this situation? What decision would they make? And you take those points of input and allow it to help guide your decision. Because guess what? Oftentimes your gut will tell you the right answer.
Yeah,
definitely.
But
you need to get there. And sometimes having that personal board of directors, either real or imagined, will help you get to that point.
And make sure they aren't naysayers. You don't want people that are like, why are you going after that? You shouldn't do that. You want people that build you up and buoy you and support your dreams and your visions. You want direct and honest that say, I don't think that's such a good idea. Why don't you pivot a little bit here?
Yeah, they'll do it constructively. They'll do it in a way where it's not tearing you down. It's not making you feel bad for thinking you want to do X, Y, or Z, but maybe it's guiding or redirecting a new thought. And that's okay. And you also don't have to take their advice. I interviewed David Meltzer and he gave great advice. He goes, just because someone loves you doesn't mean they give good advice.
That's good.
Just because someone loves you doesn't mean they give good advice.
Yeah, just say, oh, thank you. And keep going.
Totally.
That's all. You don't have to do anything more than that. Who do you listen to these days? Who are your mentors, real or imagined?
So for those who spent some time with me on Clubhouse, you probably remember Brendan Kumarasamy. So Brendan and I became very close because we did so many rooms together on Clubhouse, but he's a brilliant guy, incredibly smart. If you don't know who he is, look him up. But he's one of the first people I'll call if I need advice. Another guy who introduced us is Sam Kamani. He's built a bunch of startups that he's sold, has a great brain when it comes to architecting and thinking about how to make decisions when you're a new business. So I have a business that's just under 2 years old. And so I'll throw some ideas at him. Some people that I worked with at Tesla that I value their opinion and I ask them all the time, like my friend David Neese and another friend, Chris Maddox. So those would be the real ones. And then imagined ones, I do think about people who have done remarkable things and who are visionaries. So I worked for Elon Musk, and I'm not going to lie, it wasn't the easiest thing to be an employee at Tesla, but I admire the way he thinks. And specifically, I admire the way he thinks about how to build something from the ground up. I'll give you a perfect example. I believe that Tesla is as successful as it is for one reason. Actually, I'll say two reasons. One is first principles thinking. And two, which is kind of part of first principles thinking, is being able to ask the hard questions. So we'll talk mainly about first principles thinking. This is the idea that just because something exists, like a car, doesn't mean that you should make a modest improvement from what already exists. Who's to say what already exists is the best possible model? It's not. And
Yeah.
so what Elon did and what Tesla did is we built the car from the ground up, thinking about the windshield, thinking about the doors, thinking about the chassis, and every single part of the vehicle is imagined almost as if there had never been a car to begin with. And so the idea here is you don't reason by analogy, but instead you boil things down to their fundamental truths. We know we have the laws of physics, and we know we have some baseline things that we need to be mindful of. We probably need a wheel to make it roll. So we knew we needed that. But other than that, like, it's fair game. And so I don't care what kind of product or service you offer, what industry you're in, what business you're a part of, but I encourage you to think about things with that kind of mindset. And then as you're going through and navigating that, don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. Do I really need to do it this way? Is this really the best way to do it? Or could I reimagine it with a totally new way of thinking?
It reminds me of, I had this fabulous idea to mentor new attorneys because I've been practicing a long time. I get a ton of calls, and I know they don't want to hear that. I mean, new attorneys starting out on their own practice. And I mean, they don't want to hear, oh, I get tons of calls, but I can help them. I thought if we just pull all of those together, and I have this whole new rubric for this, where we can mentor them and help, and they don't have to invent the wheel, and how to be careful that you don't take cases. Anyway, all the other everyone I run this by, not the new attorneys, the seasoned, were hard. Nobody would come on board with me. I'm like, this is so great. I mean, there's enough for everybody. There's an abundance mindset, but anyway, there aren't as many attorneys that live in this kind of world as we do. I guess.
But I also
It's
get
just
it, and I
slower,
relate
yeah.
to that. No,
And
it's go ahead.
yeah, no, it's like I'm gonna bring it up again because I'm going to a conference in a few weeks. I'm gonna be like, "Hey." I keep trying, but
And
yeah.
I'm sure someone, and probably a lot of people, will appreciate you sharing what's allowed you to be in that position, because I relate to what you said. I have no shortage of people who have an interest in what my company Podify does, because we help people make podcasts. And
Right.
everybody's starting a podcast.
Yeah.
As I don't think it takes, you don't need to look far to see
And
all the new podcasts popping up. But to your point, had I not done the things on the front end, and you're building the network, and you get referrals and all the things that allow you to have that phone keep ringing or have the emails keep coming in. But that didn't happen by accident, Lauren. And you know this. It
yeah.
was years of you being you, and you being such a warm, inviting, loving person, caring person, but also somebody that can be trusted when it comes to handling the legal side of what you do. So it makes perfect sense that that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've had this idea for so long, and nobody seems it
Do
just
it.
makes sense. Oh, I want to. It's not, I can invent the wheel, but in this case, but it's not something I can do alone. So, but
Yeah, 100%.
I'll keep, I will be a lot more vocal about it this conference, since we're finally in person again. So anyway, so here we have people, they're taking the leap, they're ready to go, and they want to really build, right?
Mhm.
Because this is about reaching your full potential. Now they want to go that level up. You've been talking to all these amazing leaders. What kind of advice would you give, or what have you gleaned from talking to all these insightful people, use your podcast?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, first I would say is not all paths are created equally. And what I mean by that is when you start on your path, remember that there's going to be points where you can get leverage through either other people or systems or tools or strategy. And so my suggestion is to poke holes in whatever way you're thinking about proceeding, because I think often what we settle on is the easiest path, or something that we're comfortable doing, or something that we're familiar with. But often that's the wrong path, because there's a faster or a better path that you can create if you do it with more strategy. And so my suggestion is leverage. This goes back to your network, and they say your network is your net worth. Well, sure, that's a cliche statement, but there's truth in it. And the reason why is that you get in front of success when you find people who have been down the path you want to go. So if somebody has done whatever it is, X, Y, or Z, and they've done it in a really solid way, ask them what they did right. And also ask them where they made a mistake. And so I would say that when you're designing this path that you're going on, be very, very mindful of how you're doing it, because there could be a much, much, much faster approach that will allow you to get from point A to point B, almost like you're walking through a door as opposed to taking a train cross country. And so often we get busy, right? We're busy doing X, Y, Z, all the things we think we're supposed to be doing. When in reality, we should sit back and take a moment to reflect and really say, is this the best path? So I'd rather spend 5 hours planning the trip and then 10 minutes getting there than spend 10 minutes and take 2 weeks to get there. And so I think taking that beat and that pause. And the last thing I'll share is give your brain a time to think. We have this incredible tool in our head called our mind or our brain. But the reality is we're constantly overwhelming it with decisions and noise and information. And that causes our prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that's right behind our forehead, it's overworked. It's the CEO executive functioning part of our brain. And when we constantly bombard it with information or need it to solve problems or make decisions, guess what? It can't have a moment of insight. It can't have an aha. But when you go on a walk or you take a shower or even go to the bathroom, all of a sudden the light bulb goes off. Why does that happen? It happens because your prefrontal cortex has finally been given the opportunity to think and not be burdened with all the other things. So give yourself a chance to reflect, take time to strategize, and also make sure your brain is not constantly in go, go, go mode.
Yeah, that's why I'm a big proponent of meditation. But besides that, I won't. Yeah, and actually, I'm making sure I walk without my phone since we did our podcast interview.
That's
Just to give me
awesome. I
some.
love it.
Yeah, I'm making sure I have some more downtime. You also, when you were saying that, you're the one that told me if I want to post something on social media that makes me cringe, post it. You were like, post it. If it's cringy, post it. If I'm like, I don't want to do this, I don't, that means it's really good. So
Yeah,
I share that with other people. I'm like, yeah, okay. And yeah, the uncomfortable way is probably like, I like that it's faster. I like fast. If there's a faster, easier way, because you always think, oh, it's the most difficult. Oh, if you're really trudging and it's hard, that's probably the best way to go. So I love that, taking the time, and maybe it's just a door opens and here you are. It doesn't always have to be really hard.
Well, and you never know whose life will be impacted by you putting out that piece of content, by you releasing that podcast episode, by you making that video. And maybe one person, but one person's life changed. I mean, what else can you ask for? I mean, we're in this age, you got to like almost get chills thinking about it, where we could influence somebody across the world and not even know that we did it. And that's not the way it was even just 30 years ago, let alone 100 years ago, where there wasn't mass media or any of these other ways we communicate. And so we do have this incredible opportunity and actually responsibility to help people and share things that might empower or uplift or inspire or motivate or be a guiding light to give somebody something that they might not have already had. And so, yes, 100%. I mean, vulnerability and authenticity, these are buzzwords that we hear all the time right now, but for good reason, because that's the human side of us and people want to relate to that human side. I'll just share a quick quote. This is from James Altucher, which is where I really got that mindset. I already kind of knew it instinctually, but he sums it up in this very simple way. He goes, he does not hit publish, and he's a big blogger. He doesn't hit publish until he's worried what people will think about him. He doesn't hit publish until he's worried what people will think about him. And that's just always been on my mind. I'm not going to say that every single post has to be like a vulnerable post, but it does allow you to be vulnerable and human and show that side of you. So it's a good rule of thumb and something that can, I believe, help you and direct you to, you may not feel comfortable putting that out. It may be something that you have some sort of hesitation, but imagine the impact you can make on somebody by putting it out.
Yeah. And you never know the domino effect also. Yeah. I mean, you just don't. So I always love that. So, any last word? And by the way, all of Billy's links and everything are right there along with this video. So you can reach him. You're easy to reach. But any last words before we end the live stream? And welcome to anybody who's watching later on. I forgot to say that. I'm so glad that you tuned in.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'd say this for anyone watching either the live or the recorded version of the live or listening to the podcast, take a moment. If this in some way helped you, and not because of me, Lauren's created a platform where she opens up the, I would say the gates to inspiration and motivation to give you hope and to give you something that will hopefully make you feel better. And if this show, whether it be this episode or another episode, made you feel better, take a moment and go to your favorite platform. It could be Apple, it could be Spotify or wherever, and write a review. And people don't do this enough, and you don't know how much it means to the creator. And so do this for any creator that you like. And hopefully that you make that a habit, because often it's those little things that make someone who's putting out this content and giving so much, it puts wind in their sails. It helps them keep going. And it would mean a lot to me. And I'm sure it would mean a lot to Lauren if you take the time to go review her show, 52 Weeks of Hope.
Oh, that was so nice. Thank you. Yeah, and it is true.
Right? It's those little things. I mean,
a review would be great. Thank you. Well, thank you so much. If you haven't heard Billy's episode number 104, wherever it's available, anywhere you listen to podcasts or on the website at 52weeksofhope.com, where we also have a quiz. Do you self-sabotage? So, along with all the other episodes, of course, and all of the links to find Billy and everything else. So thank you so much for doing this. This was great.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, everyone. I had a blast.